A Marine is characterized as one who possesses the highest of military virtues. He obeys all orders, respects his seniors, and strives constantly to be the very best at everything he does. Discipline and spirit are the hallmarks of a Marine. You too can become a Marine if you develop discipline and spirit. We will give every effort to train you, even after some of you have given up on yourself. You're listening to Two Marines, One Mike.
All right, let's. I'm going to do a little intro, and we're going to see if Angelo can keep up, because usually there's another one of us, Wade, who I started this podcast with, and he's got two little girls and they're at track practice right now.
Okay. So you got the backup quarterback in here, man.
Well, you know what? It actually works out because Angelo's been talking about your stuff for like.
Oh, okay.
Since I've known him now. And
all right. So you got a guy that's got some brains in there at least.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right. There you
right.
Go.
See?
Nice.
They pay me the big bucks.
I ate lettuce today, so don't fucking shoot me.
Well, you might be a little cognitively impaired then. So I'll cut you some slack on that then.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to hear about this, because this is like, if I could eat all meat all the time, like, I'm doing it. So I don't need you to convince me. I just want to hear about it, because this is like a dream come true for me. I'm just scared.
I'll tell you, I just got done. I had two professional MMA fighters come out to the house and we trained. And one of them's switched on totally all meat. He's been doing it for about 6 months, and he's like totally changed my career. He's just like, I feel 10 years younger. All my aches and pains are gone. He's killing it. And we had another guy who just got signed for the UFC. So have them over to my house. I put them through a workout, kick their ass, and then we feed them steak. And so it worked out pretty well. So you can just eat steak and just eat meat. We can go into the details on why that's so. But,
yeah.
Short answer.
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can.
So let's do an intro here. Ready? 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Two Marines, One Mike. Not as always. We changed it up today. Angelo's sitting in the hot seat. Angelo's sitting in the hot seat with Dr. Sean Baker. Dr. Baker, welcome.
Yeah, I got to say I'm confused, because there's two mics. You guys got two mics, so I'm just confused on the deal there, man. What's the story on that?
They started with one mic.
So we started with a like a $20 like Blue Yeti Snowball mic. And I mean, actually, we recorded probably most of our episodes, even when we had these mics. And we got another mic back there where Angelo usually sits, and another one stuffed in a bag in case we have 4 people. So it's like, I can't change the name of the podcast every time. It's evolved. We'll call it that.
It's got a history.
I'm going to take the logo on the back. I'll cross out the 1 and add an S. Two Marines, Mikes.
Mikes. There you go.
And Mikes. I'll make it an and sign, like an ampersand, and then add an S. We'll make it plural, and we'll be good to go.
That's right. Okay. You don't have to do it for me. I thought that.
I would. If you asked me to, I probably would.
Now, if you had a vegan on here, they probably wouldn't have noticed that.
Well, it's funny, because we have had, and we've tried it all. I'm not going to lie to you, and we'll. Basically, the purpose of our podcast is to give people the skills and tools that they need to kind of. 1, transition from the military, and 2, if you find yourself in a rut in the civilian world, kind of how to pull yourself out of it, and some information, skills, and tools that can help people do that. So this is right up the alley, especially for us, being in the fitness industry and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Dr. Baker, and then we'll roll.
Sure. Okay. Well, my name's Sean Baker. I am a medical physician. I'm an orthopedic surgeon by training. I do have a military background. I served 2 different times in the Air Force. Initially, I was there as a nuclear weapons guy, so I used to launch the ICBMs. I was stuck in a hole in the bottom of Wyoming, for about 5 years. Military put me through medical school. I was playing sports for them. I played rugby for the military team, the Armed Forces team. I have to give you guys a little jail. I've got a shirt from a Marine that I took off of him because I scored more tries in him in a sort of an military competition. And so I got his Marine shirt. I was kind of proud of that. But, I basically, surgeon, went back into the military as a surgeon. I was in Afghanistan, deployed, take care of a bunch of people, all the trauma. And, that was pretty fairly intense stuff, saw a lot of stuff, the sacrifices people made, went into civilian, practice after I got out of the military, and then just kind of by course of my own sort of health journey, despite being an athlete, I started seeing, this is the aging stuff that comes naturally, or we think comes naturally, in my sort of early mid 40s, transitioned through different dietary strategies. Eventually, after many, many years, found out that eating a bunch of meat was the best thing for me personally, and have been thriving on that for about 5 years now, and have had the fortune to bring this to many thousands of people now, and we've seen just really incredible things happening, including people with a lot of ex-military guys or current military guys doing it, a lot of professional athletes, a lot of people with all kinds of diseases. We've got Harvard University's done a study on this now, several of those studies in progress. So it's been kind of my, I guess, reason for being over the last 5 years, and probably will be for probably the rest of the time I'm here, I imagine.
So it's rolling right into it. So we've all heard, and most of us have experienced, I would say, all of the, if not all, most of like fad dieting and your paleo, your Mediterranean, your what's that, the keto one,
Keto,
all of these other things, and there's especially like in, let's say, the bodybuilding community, everybody's talking, it's high protein, low carbs, or CrossFit, you're eating rice all day long and stuff like that. How did you figure out to ditch basically everything else? Like, and is it 100% meat all the time?
Well, how I came to that is, like I said, I was about 43 years old. I had just won a world championship in something called the Highland Games, where I wore a kilt and threw big telephone poles around and threw rocks and heavy weights. And I was sitting at about 280 pounds. I'm 6'5", so I was a big, strong guy.
Okay.
But I decided that, at that point I was kind of tired of carrying that much weight. So I went on a diet, which at that time I went on a really, what I would consider the sort of normal diet that you would tell you to do, reducing calories, reducing fat, eating a lot of leafy greens, lean protein sources.
Yeah.
And it worked. I mean, it clearly worked for me. I got down to about 230, but I was literally absolutely miserable. I mean, I was literally hungry all the time. I was pissed off all the time. I just didn't feel good. And I knew that it wasn't going to be sustainable. And that was on top of, I coupled that with quite a bit of exercise. I was already exercising hard, but I just increased that. So, I mean, it does work. I mean, it's just not, in my view, it's not a sustainable way to live. And so then I transitioned to some of the things you mentioned: a paleo diet, a low carbohydrate diet, a ketogenic diet. And I spent, 4, 5, 6 years doing that. And then I just started I just kind of found my way into a group of people that were doing a meat-based diet. And I thought it was curious. I thought it was crazy. Just like everybody else does. I thought that sounds pretty weird. But I had enough curiosity to kind of be open-minded about it and observe the folks and talk to some of them. And back in 2016, I said, well, I'm going to do it for 30 days. And I'd already done it for a day or two here. I had steak and eggs for breakfast one day. And then I had it for all day, all day. It was all I ate. Yeah. And I did it for 2 days, and then 3 days, and then a week. And then I did it for a month. And at the end of the month, I was like, I really feel good. This is literally the best I've felt in probably 10 years. Because the 30 days was over, I went back to eating kind of a more omnivorous diet. I started to put in fruits and some vegetables and some other things. And I immediately felt worse. I was just like, this is dramatically worse. My back started hurting. I started having digestive issues. And so I quickly decided, look, I'd rather feel good. I don't care. I'm 50 years old. I'd rather feel good than not feel good. So I went back on an all meat diet, and basically have done that for the last almost 5 years now, 4.5 years or so. And then, for me, I honestly feel best when I'm on strict, just red meat, just eating a bunch of steaks all day. Sometimes I'll add eggs. Sometimes I'll put a little dairy in there. Sometimes I'll put some seafood. I'll use some seasonings occasionally. But that's generally what my diet has been for the most part over, like I said, nearly half a decade. And I literally just feel tremendous. I mean, like I said, I'm 54 and I'm out here training with professional MMA guys that are 20 some years younger than me, and
right,
keeping up with leading them, keeping up and beating these guys. So it's kind
of that's incredible. I mean, that's every time we go out to eat, Angela's like, he ordered a breakfast so big that just consisted of steak and eggs that they had to use 2 skillets to cook it.
Yeah, good for him. Yeah.
And so But I'm a red meat guy. Like I am. Like I could eat steak all day long, every day, every meal. I would imagine a lot of the questions that you get have to do with the red meat's effects on like blood, arteries, things like that. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional, but you are.
Right.
So how did your background and how did that research go? And I imagine you used your own probably blood work and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, so this sort of thought that red meat is a cause of, this or that disease, cancer, heart disease, or the typical ones you hear about, that's really based on something called nutritional epidemiology. That is to say, they look at a giant population of people and say, what are you guys eating? Or what do you think you remember you sort of ate? And this is how they do this research. They give you something called a food frequency questionnaire. They give you a list of 500 foods and say, how many of these did you eat in the last year? The odds of you getting accurately assessing those questions is very, very low. In fact, we know it's horrible. You could ask me and I'd do it pretty well because I just eat damn steak every day. I say, yeah, I eat steak every day, nothing else. I could do that test, but the average person eats an omnivorous diet, screws it up all the time. In fact, there's been studies looking to validate these food frequency questionnaires. There was a particular study out of Germany that I read about 2 years ago, and they found that, 9 out of 25 times were they able to correctly identify, like what they did was they actually wrote down and weighed and measured everything they ate for a period of time, about 4 days. 30 days later, they asked them to recall what they had eaten.
Less than half.
Yeah, not even half.
30%. Yeah.
9 out of 25 times, they only got 50% or more of those things right for each category. Was it meat? Was it fruit? Was it vegetable?
Wait, so 9 out of 25 times they got only 50%.
Right. The rest of the 16 out of 25, they weren't even 50% accurate. Okay. So it's so incredibly bad. And this is where so much of this research and all these sort of, relationships, these sort of, relative risk numbers come from, and they're also very low, 1.2%, 1.2, 20%, which is basically nonsense. In fact, the Journal of American College of Cardiology just came out in 2020 with a paper that said, there is no evidence that shows that saturated fat from red meat, from eggs, from chocolate, from milk, from dairy causes heart disease. There's no evidence out there. 2019, Nutrirex, largest study ever done on red meat, 14 international authors, one of them which was a guy named by the name of Gordon Guyatt. Gordon Guyatt, the term evidence-based medicine was invented by Professor Gordon Guyatt out of McMaster University in Canada. He actually invented the term evidence-based medicine. He's been studying that since 1990. He was on that paper that said red meat is not bad for you. Basically what they concluded is there is no significant evidence to show that red meat causes cancer, causes heart disease, or any of that stuff. The only evidence out there is extremely weak. And so they put out a paper that says, we suggest you keep eating as much meat as there are. There's no evidence to make you change. Of course, the vegan folks got all upset. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, chaired by Dr. Neil Barnard, a huge vegan advocate, a PETA guy, petition the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, to retract the 6 papers that have been published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. That didn't go through. They continue to complain about that paper. There's several papers that have been done since 2015 when the World Health Organization, through the IARC, announced that red meat was a class 2 carcinogen, which has clearly been shown not to in many, many subsequent studies.
That's crazy. So going kind of full circle, like, you were talking about like the brain and stuff like that, and how a vegan wouldn't have noticed the one mic in the background. But what's funny is, probably about a year ago, right when the Game Changers documentary came out on Netflix, I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Sure. Yeah.
We had James Wilkes come on our show, and we talked, and like I get he's not a doctor, good dude, but at the end of the day, the one thing that I did learn from watching that documentary is how research is done on studies like that. So I guess my question is, in all the studies that you're talking about with the meat stuff, is who's funding those studies? Right. Because, at the end of the day, like making sure that you're getting, good information. And I'm sure, you're digging, because I'm doing this. I'm going to do this for 30 days, all meat.
I'm already on it. So,
but you hear a lot about studies that are convoluted by, by the meat industry, and by, on the other side, by, companies like Monsanto that are growing, grains and things like that, and the dairy industry. How much of that comes into play with the meat industry research that's being done?
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a good point. But they've done studies looking at industry funded studies. Something like 90% of all studies that are ever published that are funded by industry will support that particular industry, whether it's the pharmaceutical industry or sugar or
always
meat or dairy. It's always going to be published. And the reason that works is it's not that necessarily the research is always bad. Sometimes it can be, and there's problems with methodology and the interpretation of the studies. Yeah. But what happens is if you're a researcher and you publish a study that says meat is good, you're likely to get more meat funding sent your way. Or you say that meat or sugar is good, you're going to get more Coca-Cola funding. So that's how it works. And I think that's clearly a problem. There is a tremendous problem with all the medical studies out there. I mean, they're all subject to bias. Almost, there's very few that are not. Some people say the NIH studies are not subject to bias, but in reality they are. And so really, and this is a thing that I tell people, we've got some people that think they can predict the future. They can say, well, we know what diet is going to make you live to be 100 and you're not going to get heart disease and you're not going to get cancer. I say that's absolute garbage. There's never been a study. There never will be a study. There cannot be a study that can actually show us with any sort of reasonable certainty, because to do that study, you would need to lock up basically twins, 1,000 twins, and lock them up in a metabolic chamber for 50 years and only vary their diets. Yep. You can't do that study.
With no other variables, right?
Yeah, with no other variables. They all exercise the same amount. They all sleep the same amount, so on and so forth. So you can't do those studies. So what I will tell people is if I can't know, and I never tell people eating a carnivore diet is going to make you live longer, you're never going to get heart disease, you're never going to get cancer. What I will tell you is, and I think this is something, a goal that we should be able to go after. If you are currently sick, whether you're obese, whether you have high blood pressure, whether you have diabetes, whether you have mental health disorders, whether you have digestive issues, arthritis, can you get better from that? Can you improve where you are? And I think you can. And I think that is what we should focus on. And if you can say, like I said, if you become healthy today, you're more likely to be healthy tomorrow, provided you keep doing the things that are keeping you healthy. Right. I think it's as simple as that. When we get into, don't do this because in 25 years, you're going to have a heart attack. It's silly. It's a waste of time. And I think we're actively harming people by focusing on, something that might kill you. I might get hit by a damn bus tomorrow. I want to live. I want to have a good quality of life while I'm here, and I want to function as good as I can. I want to be strong and robust and lean and thinking sharp, and every part of my body works well. If you can do that, then you've really accomplished something. And I think this is where the focus in the medical system is been off. I was talking with the folks from CrossFit Health asked me to talk to them about recommendations. This is one of the things I'm saying. We've got to redefine how we define health. Yeah. It's not what's your cholesterol, what's your this, that. It is, are you smiling? I mean, literally, does your body work like it's supposed to? And it can be as simple as that.
Yeah. Oh man. It's so interesting too, because when I met Phil and Wade and them, I had just started the carnivore diet, where I was on the tail end of 5 months, the 5 months into it, and I had already lost close to 40 pounds, and all these aches and pains had gone away. And the entire time, everyone's like, you're crazy. You're going to have a heart attack and have all this. And here I am, the strongest, healthiest, and mentally clear I've ever been in my entire life. And when I hear people talk about being vegan and how it makes you stronger, it's so backwards, because, plant-based protein is 60% efficient versus red meat, the protein and animal-based protein. So your bone density starts to go to waste when you start consuming and replacing all these animal based proteins. I mean, red meat is just
I think there's something to be said, like you said, Dr. Baker, about quality of life and mental capacity, right? That's one of my biggest fascinations, is how the food that you eat affects your brain. And you've touched on that, more than a handful of times. So I'd like if you could dive into that and just kind of the differences between, the omnivorous diet and the carnivore diet and the effects that it has on mental health and things like that.
Sure. And I think this is a really powerful and important topic, particularly in the military community. We have a lot of folks in the military that suffer from PTSD and other things that are due to the exposure they have.
It was a completely selfish question, right?
Well, no, and I certainly think it's something to talk about. And I've seen a lot of guys, military guys, that have mental health issues from whatever it may be, PTSD, depression, anxiety, alcoholism, drug addiction. The diet makes a difference, and a lot of times it helps you pull these guys out of their despair. And people think that's sort of crazy, but it really does seem to have a role. And we know that, say, for instance, we know that the gut has a role, has an effect on the brain. What we eat clearly affects our health, our entire body, our entire physiology, and the brain is part of that. And so to think that nutrition would not have an impact on mental health is just kind of absurd in my mind. But there are people out there that think there's nothing to do with it. It clearly does. We know that there's something that gut permeability is affected by what we put in our gut. That is how much the things that are allowed to pass, through our gut barrier and into our cells and into our circulation. That's regulated by the integrity of the gut. And the integrity of the gut can be damaged by, I think the modern diet really does a number on it. That's why we see so many people suffering from digestive issues, whether it's irritable bowel syndrome or even inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease, and those things are all on the rise, ulcerative colitis, so on and so forth. When you have a gut that's leaky or hyperpermeable, we also see that other membranes get permeable, including the blood-brain barrier. And so we see leaky gut, leaky brain. Those things can affect that. We can see increased inflammation. The inflammation can affect the brain tissue as well. The nutrients, like for instance, there was a nice study out of, I think it was Stanford or it might have been UCF or Stanford, 2018, looking at a substance called carnitine. Carnitine is found very much exclusively in red meat. There's almost no plant sources at all that have it. Most people that go on a vegan, vegetarian, low meat diet will be low in carnitine, even though we can make carnitine ourselves, but you still end up with a relative low level. We also know that people suffering from major depressive disorders have low levels of carnitine. And so when you supplement those people with carnitine, their depression gets better, or better in my view, you let them eat red meat and then they feel better. And a lot of people, it really is. It's kind of a happy pill. Steak can be it can just make you feel better when you get enough of that in your system. A lot of people are deficient in things like zinc and iron and many other nutrients, and carnosine and carnitine and creatine and taurine and anserine and all these different compounds that are unique to beef or unique to meat in general. You don't get that in some of the diets, and even B12. A lot of omnivores are B12 deficient. Many vegans are, many vegetarians are B12 deficient. That has an effect on brain function and brain physiology, brain development in kids in particular. And the argument is, well, omnivores have it too. Well, my counter argument is most Americans, if we look at the standard American diet, people talk about Tom Brady. Tom Brady eats 80% plants, 20% meat. Well, guess what? The average American only gets about 7-8% of its diet from meat. That's a very small amount. Most of that is coming from dairy. If we're looking at the animal foods we eat, about 30% of the American diet is animal source, but very small amount is red meat. Only 5%, 7%. The rest of it's coming from poultry, dairy, a little bit of eggs and stuff like that. Tom Brady actually eats more red meat than the average American. He eats more fish than the average American. He eats more eggs than the average American. So that's a misnomer to think he's on a plant-based diet. The problem is the average American is eating some red meat, a little bit, some dairy, and then a whole bunch of refined garbage. 70% of the American diet is coming from plant foods. And most of that, unfortunately, is sugar, refined grains, vegetable oils, which is just, it's just trash for our human physiology.
Yeah. There's the old saying, if you want to get to the grocery store fast, shop around the outside because no one else is out there,
just go straight back to the butcher's. Just go straight back to the butcher's department. You're good, man.
Right?
Take you 5 minutes in and out.
Now, in like, I would say preparing your meals, one, are you looking at the same amount of calories to intake as you would on like a regular diet? We're talking, not necessarily macros, but calories in versus calories out.
Yeah, so I mean, calories matter. They clearly do, and I push back on the people that say that calories have no role. Now, let me put some caveats to that. We
That
know
doesn't
that
make
higher
any sense,
protein,
right?
higher protein is going to be an advantage. We know there are fairly significant thermic effect of food for protein.
Yep.
Protein, about 25% of the protein calories you consume are required just to process it, so they're kind of wasted calories. Fat and carbohydrates somewhere around 5%. So you've got this big advantage by eating more protein. The average person eating a meat-based diet, on average, is getting about 30% of their calories, maybe a little bit more from protein. The rest comes from fat and, an insignificant amount from carbohydrates. The average American is eating 12 to 16% of their calories coming from protein. So you've already doubled your protein intake. So because of that thermic effect of food, you might be able to eat a little more. You might be able to eat 200 or 300 extra calories a day and still be at weight maintenance. The other thing is, and this is controversial. There's some studies that would suggest that reducing carbohydrates gives you another few hundred calories advantage. That's hotly debated. There's some people that complain about the studies that show that because they think the methodology is wrong. There's other people that say that it doesn't matter. Calories are calories, and they still accept that protein is an issue. I really, when I tell people to start this diet, I tell them, first of all, just eat to comfort, eat to satiety. You're generally going to get some feedback. If we think about, if we go out in the wild and look at any animal on the planet outside of dogs and cats, which we feed, they don't really get chronic disease. They don't get overweight, and no one is telling them how much to eat. No one is telling them to count macros. They don't have a Fitbit. They don't have an app to tell them how to eat. It's just like, so, and I think humans largely should be able to, if there's a food that we're designed to eat, and I would argue that humans are certainly omnivorous. We are opportunistic omnivores. That is to say, if ancient man had Twinkies, he would have eaten Twinkies.
Yep.
He just didn't have them. But I think we're something called a facultative carnivore, which means meat is the primary best food for us, and everything else is, if it's available, we'll eat it when we can't get meat. And so I think that's what our physiology and anatomy has evolved to do. And so I think so many of us are suffering from different poor relationships with food, whether it's addiction, whether it's other substances. And so you have to break yourself of that. And so in the beginning, I tell people, just load up on steak and eggs, bacon, whatever, put a piece of cheese on there if you want it. Just eat until you're full. So how much do you need to eat? Eat enough so you don't want a damn cupcake. That's the answer to how much you need to eat in the beginning. Now, whether you lose weight or not with that strategy, may or may not. A lot of guys do well with that and they lose weight, some don't. Later on, once you've kind of got past that food craving, food addiction, craving for carbohydrate stuff, once you get past that, and that may take a couple of weeks or a couple of months, then you can start to play and say, hey, can I go higher on the protein, higher on the fat? Play with meal timing, play with intermittent fasting. All those things can come on board. But I think the first step is to fix being a friggin', food addict.
Right. Now going from there, I guess we could just go kind of step by step. And you walked us through a real, basically general start to that. Eat till you're full until you don't want to eat cupcakes. Now we're talking about fats. Is fat coming from, how are you cooking most of your steak? Or you're not?
I like it hot and seared, man. I'll throw a steak, just the bottom line is you cook it like you like it. I think people get too concerned about that, and I don't have any problem with high heat cooking. I think the data that shows you that getting a sear on your meat is bad for you, the data is really weak on that. So I'm not concerned about that. Humans have been cooking, meat over fire for hundreds of thousands of years, if not a million years. So that's not, in my view, an issue. And so, I like it, how I like it personally may not be how you like it. Now, if you like it well done and you put ketchup on it, I'm going to make fun of you. But
right. Well, that's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily getting in toward like the temperature of meat. More along the lines of, like, what are you cooking it in? Are you just throwing it on open fire grill? Are you putting it in a pan with butter?
Sure. Yeah. So, I can do whatever. I've got so many different ways to cook steaks. I sous vide them sometimes in either a water bath, or I've got a little device that does it in a little machine. I dry age steaks sometimes. I'll throw it on. I've got a grill that goes to 1500 degrees, so I'll flash sear it in there. I've got sometimes I'll throw in a cast iron pan and some butter or some tallow. Lately I've been using something called Wagyu beef tallow, and it tastes really nice. I'll throw a little salt on there, and that's good for me. Like this morning, I had 3 ribeyes for breakfast, probably about 3.5 pounds of meat. And that's going to be my meal for the day. Probably. That may be the only meal I eat today. And so, I mean, that's a fairly typical day for me. I mean, I usually eat 1 or 2 meals a day.
Okay. That was kind of my next question is, are you coupling this for yourself or in your practice to intermittent fast along with that? Like once we break that food addiction, once we're not eating cupcakes and garbage?
I mean, if you want to, I do. At this point, I've been doing this for 5 years. At this point, I'm like, I don't really care. I can do whatever. I could eat 6 meals a day and I'd be fine. I can eat 1 meal a day. It doesn't matter. I'm not hungry. I eat when I want to. It's very easy for me to transition to either ones. I'm playing with things. I'm looking at different outcomes. What's blood glucose doing in the morning if I'm eating 1 meal a day versus 2 meals a day. Really, I do this because I have a lot of people that I kind of interact with and trying to help out and trying to find out what works, what may work for other people based on assuming most people share kind of a similar physiology. And so, I think some people need this artificial time window,
Okay,
for
I was going to say like a
fasting.
template. Yeah.
Yeah, some people need that. Some people they just can't get intuitive with their eating, and so they tend to overeat or undereat or something like that. I think diet, if you're on the right diet, it should lend itself to basically an intuitive physiologic fasting. That is to say, like, I'm just not hungry. So if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat. That makes sense.
Right.
I mean, and then if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. For me, it's once or twice a day. That's when I'm hungry. And usually I eat when I'm hungry. If I eat enough in that 1 meal, then I'm not hungry. Like it's 2:00 in the afternoon. Here I am. I ate at 8 a.m. That was, what is that? 6 hours ago. I'm not hungry at all. I'm totally not
Right.
hungry at all. And I probably won't be hungry till tomorrow. And so I'm fine.
What is your view on like organs and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting because there's a lot of people that have kind of come into this carnivore community and they want to sort of share their beliefs. I think there's nothing wrong with eating organ meats. I think if you like them, you should eat them. What I do push back on are the people that saying you must have them in the diet for you to be in optimal health. I don't think that's based on anything other than a nice story, or our ancestors ate and sort of, sort of felt every part of the animal was super important and it's not wasteful. And those things are all true. Do you need to do that? That's the more important and germane question. And what I've found is that in my particular case, no, I've done survey data on something like 12,000 people doing this diet. The vast majority of them do not eat organs with any regularity. Only 15% had organs at least once a week. So 85% of the people are eating them either never or infrequently. The outcomes with regard to disease reversal, quality of life was no difference. Harvard University has done a study on this carnivore diet in 2,000 people. It's yet to be published, but I've seen the data on that. And it basically shows the same thing. No difference in evidence of nutrient deficiencies, no difference in outcomes with regard to reduction of medications. And so there's a lot of people that want to do this. Some of them want to sell you supplements or sell you liver snaps or whatever. I don't know. Now, it doesn't mean one particular individual may do better with them. And I don't discount that. But to say that all people need to do this to be successful in this diet is not grounded in anything other than theoretical conjecture. When the rubber meets the road, and in fact, the people that have been doing this diet for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, almost all of them saying, you don't need them. I don't use them. And it's fine. And a lot of people don't like them. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, why would a food that you don't like be essential for you? That doesn't make sense at all. Now people turn that argument around and say, well, sugar and ice cream taste really, really good. The problem is the availability of that in nature was not very high, right? I mean, there wasn't a chocolate cake tree that man was walking around and seeing.
Right.
So,
I mean, there should
right.
be. I'd be on the chocolate cake diet. I'd be writing
I
books.
I wish that chocolate and sugar was healthy and all that stuff. And hell, that'd be a great diet. We'd all love it.
Yeah. Now we're all human and prone to bad decisions once in a while. How often do you find yourself eating stuff like chocolate bars and chocolate cake and shit like that?
Yeah, it's pretty infrequent. In fact, I have 4 children, and a couple of them on their birthdays, I've had a piece of their birthday cake.
A couple of them, not all of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true. For whatever kid I didn't have it and didn't have it. But I mean, I think I think in the last 5 years, I've had probably 3 or 4 pieces of cake, and that's been my kind of cheat meal. And it wasn't like planned, and I wasn't like I regularly scheduled carb days or cheat days. I'm not, this isn't a religion. This isn't reverse veganism. I'm not here to save the tomatoes or any other BS. I'm just like, yeah, life happens, you do what you do. But, if that happens, it's like, okay, great, fine. Just deal with it. Next day, get back on the horse, and it's one of those things. So for me, one time I ate it and I got really sick. I just felt like garbage. I mean, I was literally sick to my stomach. The next time I did that, I was like, yeah, no big deal. I didn't notice it. So, but I don't really crave this stuff. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking forward. I don't plan my week to think, okay, Friday I can cheat. I can have pizza and I can have cake and ice cream. Doesn't even faze me at this point. I don't think about it.
I think there's something to be said about that, because no matter what diet you're on, like, a couple of years ago, I was like all the way through, all the food addiction stuff and stuff like that. And you stop craving all of that nonsense. Like you end up starting to crave the things that you're supposed to be eating. Right. I think most people in America that go on any sort of diet don't give themselves long enough and don't kind of push themselves to the edge of that. Like you said, I don't want to eat cupcakes anymore because I ate so much good food. They don't give themselves the opportunity to really get past that, the carb craving and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if I tell you, I eat 4, 5, 6 pounds of meat a day, that sounds crazy, right? I mean, but if you've got to eat 3 pounds of meat, let's say, because you got, big guys, and that's what it takes, to fill you up. But once you allow yourself to do that, it becomes relatively easy. You're just like, okay, I got plenty of nutrition. I don't need anything. Why are we hungry all the time? It's because we're not getting the nutrition we need. And, if you try to keep feeding that with potato chips, you're still not getting, you're getting some calories, but you're not getting the nutrients that you need. You're lacking out either protein or some other, other component of the diet. And so, but once you start stuffing yourself with high quality, nutrient dense food, you kind of shut that stuff down. And there's a psychology that comes with this. There's a physiology and a psychology. If you are on a diet in which you're not satisfied, you're always hungry, or the food tastes crappy. If you put me on a cardboard quinoa kale diet, I'm going to be miserable. I might lose weight, but I'm going to hate my life. I'm going to hate myself. I'm going to sneak off and pound the ice cream, whenever my willpower breaks, which inevitably is going to happen. If you're eating steak and eggs for breakfast every day, and you can do that for 6 weeks, 8 weeks to 3, 4 months. I mean, you're in a different game, and then you do have this relationship change. And once you've got there, then you've got a little more freedom. And so it's like I can pick and choose. If I want to have a piece of cake, I'll have a piece of cake. Most of the time I don't want to or don't need to. You just don't feel that gnawing urge. God, I got to eat this, or there's something bad's going to happen. So that tends to go away.
That's incredible. And now Angelo's telling me you have a book out.
I do. Yeah, it's called The Carnivore Diet. So it's pretty straightforward.
Wow.
Shawn Baker, MD. It's been on Amazon. It's been out for, I guess, about a year now, and it's sold a whole bunch of copies. It's been translated in a couple different languages and more being translated. It's a really good, I wrote it to be very accessible, just for the average person that maybe not a nutrition scientist or a person that's really, trying to, just kind of get the how to and why, and some of the rationalization for it. It's been pretty well received. It's a good place to sort of read. It's a quick read. I mean, you can read it it's like 250 pages. You can read it in a day or two.
How come you're not done yet?
Yeah, I actually just got it yesterday.
Okay,
I started reading it.
Yeah,
I was actually I'm on page 21. I just got past when you kind of started opening up about allowing your patients to have the freedom to make a decision about their own healthcare, and how other physicians above you or higher ups were basically kind of coming down on you, and how rough that was for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was a challenging time. I mean, it was one of those things where you're conflicted. I mean, I trained as a surgeon. I was, my it was heal with heal with steel. I mean, that's the motto, if you can't hit it, you can't fix it. Right. And so, I mean, that is something
I could see that like on a unit patch. Like
that might be a new shirt for us.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, it's one of those things where, you just kind of, that's the mentality, diet, lifestyle. That's for family practice. Let those guys deal with it, because no one listens anyway. And then, as I went through my own journey, I said, hey, let me try it on some patients. And I mean, I literally had patients who were on my surgical schedule for knee replacements and hip replacements. I put them on a diet, and they're like, Doc, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. And I was like,
wow,
shit, that's pretty cool. And some of them hadn't even lost weight yet. Some of them are like, they didn't lose any weight.
Just all the inflammation.
Yeah, all the inflammation went away. And it's just like, well, you don't need surgery if your knee doesn't hurt. Why the hell would I give you a knee replacement when you have a knee that doesn't hurt?
You don't even need a new knee. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I saw it happening more and more. And then I started to say, this is cool. I want to bring this in a bigger way. And I talked to the hospital administration. I said, hey, look, I'd like to 1 day a week do lifestyle counseling. And they said, no. And, that was the beginning of the thing. And I started pushing back, and then, it ended up with me leaving the hospital and that sort of stuff. And so now I'm just doing strictly lifestyle-based stuff, which is ultimately more fulfilling and more enjoyable. And, that's
so you're not practicing orthopedic surgery anymore?
I'm not. No, I mean, I have an active medical license. I could if I wanted to. I mean, I haven't done it in a while, so you can't just walk in.
Right?
Well, you'd have to go back and sort of hang with some other surgeons been in practice. But I don't have any desire. I mean, I founded a company, MeetRx. I mean, we've got thousands of members. We are a huge resource. If you want to get started, by the way, just go to meetrx.com. That'll help you find out how you do this stuff. But that's what I do all day, and I enjoy it. I'm much happier. I've literally helped, 10-fold more people with life. I mean, with health than I have as I could have
as a surgeon. That's incredible.
If you read the testimonials on,
I'm going to. I'm going to spend the rest of my Friday evening learning how to eat meat all the time. And because I'm all about it, dude. First stop's grocery store, man. Let's do it. Butcher shop,
steak, eggs, and uncured bacon.
And because it's right up my alley, right up my alley. I think. Do you think there's any? I've heard, and this will be the last question I asked about. I think the diet itself. I've heard some stuff like eat for your blood type. I think that's the name of a book.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Yeah.
There's a book out there. Let me just give you my 3-second kind of silly answer on that. If your blood type is red, then you can eat meat, and you should eat meat. If it's green, you can be a vegan. That's fine. But if you've got red blood, you're designed to eat meat. No, I mean, the serious answer is all humans evolve the capacity, the physiology, the anatomy to be meat eaters. We all do it very well. Now, some of us may tolerate dairy more. Some of us may tolerate certain grains more. Some of us may tolerate certain types of fruits and vegetables more than others. But the basic common sort of universal ability for all human beings, and in fact, most animals that have ever walked the planet, as far as particular species, have been carnivores or carnivore based. In fact, something like 85 to 90% of every animal that has ever existed on planet Earth has had a carnivorous strategy for, nutrition absorption. It is the most efficient way to absorb the nutrients you need to build your animal cells. Your animal tissue are all contained within animal tissue. I mean, it's as simple as that. You are what you eat, and you eat what you are. I mean, I'm not an advocate for cannibalism, but what I'm saying is,
if you could, you would.
Well, I don't know how good. Some people might taste better than others. I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting. But there is, this belief. If you're building a brick house, you need bricks. You don't need twigs, right? And so, if you're building animal cell tissues, you can we do have the capacity, the backup capacity to convert things. It's very inefficient. You look at a gorilla. A gorilla is roughly, I'm 250 pounds. A gorilla is, a little bit bigger than me, or about the size of me. I eat 4 pounds of meat a day. A gorilla, for the same size gorilla, they have to eat 40 to 60 pounds of food a day. They spend 80% of their day chewing. The rest of it they spend shitting, and then they have to recycle their own shit to get B12. That is the inefficiency of a plant-based diet compared to a highly, highly well-absorbed diet that humans are super, super well adapted to.
That's the icing on the cake right there.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Dr. Baker, I know like I said, Wade's not here to join us, but one of Wade's favorite questions, steering into more of who you are as a person. You joined the Air Force. Now, we always like to ask, why did you pick that particular branch?
Yeah, that's a funny question. And I was playing rugby. I came back from New Zealand. I was playing rugby at the medical school, and we had a team. We were near a Coast Guard base, and there were a bunch of military guys. We had Army guys, Marines, we had Navy guys, we had me. My father was in the Air Force. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about joining the military. Every single one of those guys said, go join the Air Force. The Marines said Air Force, the Army guys said Air Force, the Navy guys said Air Force. I said, okay, Air Force. I mean, that's, I mean, it's kind of humorous, but I think that, maybe because my dad was in it, and I don't know, I just felt aligned. Now, I'll tell you, when I went through officer candidate school or officer training school, and I came back as a high-level professional athlete, they had the most uncoordinated goofballs as officer training. I mean, we were playing these football stuff, and I had to throw it to the girls because the guys couldn't catch stuff. I was embarrassed. I was like, what the hell? I'm with, so I was kind of like I mean, not that there aren't athletes in the Air Force, but I was just kind of thought that was a funny thing. And maybe I would have been better suited.
Everybody's throwing left foot forward. Same hand, same foot. That always looks goofy.
Yeah.
Dr. Baker. And then towards the end of our show, can you take on the billboard or what?
No.
We like to ask two questions. So the first being, if you had a blank billboard, we permanently borrowed this from Tim Ferriss. If you had a blank billboard for the world to see, what would be on your billboard?
Oh, I would say, the billboard. I think just ask questions. Ask why. I mean, I think that I think we have too many people that are just just willing to listen and they don't think. And I think we're losing this capacity for critical thought. And, I think that's something that if more people would just sort of say, and, you don't have to have a degree or a fancy title to be able to think critically. And, if it doesn't make sense to you, maybe there's a reason for that. There's things that are intuitively obvious. I think we've lost sight of that in a lot of ways. And I'm sure you guys know what I'm alluding to, but I think that if we had more people that would say, look, this doesn't even remotely make sense.
It doesn't even make sense. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of hours thinking and talking about critical thinking over the past few months. It's been interesting. It's hard because I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Like, I couldn't go in the Air Force if I wanted to. Like, I didn't get a good enough score on the ASVAB. You know what I mean? And I'm not like downing my own intelligence. Like, I went to a good college after I got out and did really well at the University of Miami, but it doesn't take that to be able to, like you said, think and make decisions for yourself. And you're how did I put this, man? You were talking about, having like a neighbor, like a degenerate neighbor, and my neighbors are great. So this isn't about my own neighbors. But having like a degenerate neighbor, and you're at home and you have kids and your neighbor's outside giving you advice on how to raise your kids. Are you going to take that advice seriously? Like, think about that. Would you do that? It's the same thing that we're doing in our community and in our country. And it's unfortunate, but everybody's so glued to the TV and allowing other people to make thoughts and decisions for them because they're fucking lazy at the end of the day. It's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, you don't outsource your intelligence or don't outsource your health. I mean, it's whatever you want to put in there. I mean, it's on you. And I think it's something that you have to be willing to take on. And, if you care about it, then you should,
put
learn how to deal with that. Yeah.
And then the last question, Dr. Baker, is we usually implement a mission of the day for our listeners and our viewers and anybody that gets their hands on this podcast. And we ask our guest on the show to implement that mission of the day, something small that our listenership and viewership can implement into their daily lives that can improve their day.
So you want me to give you something to do?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Just try this. Have a meal. Just have a carnivorous meal. There's two. Can I give you two things? So
please
I would say, and this is something I found to be very effective. Start a day. Steak and eggs, whatever, and then don't sit down before 6 p.m. Just be non-sedentary for a day. See how effect that has on you. See if you can even do it. I'm standing right now. I won't sit until 5, 6 p.m., something like that. And
is that something that you do regularly?
I do. Yeah. It's something I've kind of come in the last couple of years, and I find that that's been enormously rewarding for just general health. And it's just something, it's a small thing because we've become so sedentary. And I think
no, you're absolutely right. I'm going to have to make some adjustmts here. We'll just raise the table.
Yeah. You just stand the table up. I mean, I know it's with a podcast, you have to do what you got to do, but I mean, in general.
Well, no, I mean, we can make an adjustment.
Phil's actually standing right now. So.
You got a whole, well, not a whole foot, but almost a whole foot, and at least close to 100 pounds on me. So I'm like 5'8", 165.
Okay.
And
I'm 6'5" and about 250.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking about the carnivore diet. I'm excited to learn more, man. I'm really pumped. I haven't been pumped to get a book in a while. We have a lot of people on the show that are, talking about books and a lot of stuff that they have going on. And this has actually, really captured my attention, and I'm excited, man, just for the, I think the mental health side of things really,
I'll tell you that, in my experience, and again, I have data on, over 10,000 people, 3 months seems to be that inflection point where people, they fully transition, they start to see things, so a lot of people notice results right away, different things, but really that 3 month, that 90-day point is where, we see that. So, I mean, it's great if you do it for 30 days, it's great, but if you feel like continuing and you think, better, do it for 3 months. You can certainly, join us at MeatRx. That's a great resource. If, certainly,
I will. Sure.
The book's a good read if you want to, but that's, like I said,
do it all, man. I'm gonna do it all. I'm an action guy. I like to do stuff,
Good for you. All right.
But Angelo, final thoughts. What do you got?
Final thoughts. Eat meat. Stack up.
We do that. Yeah, you're all about it.
I'm all about it.
Let's see what happens.
It's not hard. It's not. No,
it's not. I'm a meat guy. Like I could totally, like I force myself not to, which is counterintuitive, right?
Because you're a human being, it just means you're a human being. If you like me, you've been trained not. Some people have been trained not to, but it's pretty intuitive.
Right. So. I mean, that's all I got. I got all my points out. Again, Dr. Baker, thank you so much for spending time with us. If you love watching and listening to our podcast, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow Dr. Baker. Make sure you pick up a copy of Carnivore Diet and check out MeatRx.
You must give 100% of yourself at all times.
We're out.
Be completely honest in everything that you do. A Marine never lies, cheats, or compromises. Respect the rights and properties of others. A Marine never steals. You must work hard to strengthen your body. Be proud of yourself and the uniform that you wear. Above all else, never quit, give up.